Well, we are now live on Facebook. It is Wednesday, January 6th. Happy New Year to all that have started watching from our last episode. We have our special guest on today, Bryan Walroth. And I said that correct, right?
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, you got it.
Uh, and he is out of Canada, and he represents multiple brands, mainly 3D of Canada, but he also Fine Lab, what is it? The Fine Lab, Big Boy Blowers, and Speedo Coat. And so he has quite a few different brands under his belt that he represents and handles for the entirety of Canada. He has few storefronts and a few box trucks on the road as well, distributing those supplies. And he's been in the business, gosh, over what now, 23 years. And he's, been in his own detailing business for about 8 years on top of, 10 years of managing, what was it? Production supervisor and handling luxury cars. I mean, he has a whole wealth of knowledge of where he's been and what he's done on his resume. So, Bryan, thank you for being on. We are episode number 11 for our podcast, and we definitely appreciate your time taken out of the day to be on here. So, if you
Mhm.
can, tell us a little about your background and how you got started in the detail industry and from the early ages of what, 17, you said you got
Yep.
started in this? Yeah,
Yeah,
give us.
I mean, for me, I kind of got started in, out of necessity sort of thing. I mean, all started with my first car that I got, and was lucky enough to buy a brand new car. It was an Oldsmobile. Oldsmobile, of course, is now long gone. And I was working as a student supervisor at General Motors, and was making decent money for the time, and went and picked up my first new car, and which was my first car ever. I hadn't had a car up until that point, and so I think I was 18 by the time I got my first actual car. And I had somebody had bumped into the back bumper about a year after I had the car, and put a little sort of scuff on the back bumper, and I wanted to sort of see how much it would cost. So I took it to a body shop, and they quoted some astronomical amount of money to do, like basically a polish on it. Right.
Oh,
And
wow.
at the time I was going through college, and one of the guys in my class, his dad owned a body shop. So I went there, and he took a look at it, and he goes, "Well, you could do it yourself if you want." I said, "Well, I've never done anything like that before." He goes, "Well, bring it in." He goes, "Come on a Saturday," and he goes, "I'll show you how to fix it." So that's kind of how the polishing aspect started. As far as the detailing and all the other aspects, I mean, try to keep the car clean. And of course, at the time, you don't know any better. You go to Canadian Tire or whatever. Walmart wasn't even around back when I got my first car in Canada. So, we have Canadian Tire, which is still around, and bought products from there, and tried to do what you could. You got the turtle wax going, and tried to keep it shiny, and learn some buffing, and just sort of continued on from there. And then ended up at another GM assembly plant, and sort of got talking to a bunch of the guys that worked on the line, and ended up doing a lot of classic car restorations for years after that. So started getting into sanding paint, and trying to expand on the compounding and the polishing, and stuff like that. And
So you
did
learned
a
in the field learning kind of things as you went.
yeah, so you just sort of go, guys, spread rumors about how well you can sort of do stuff when, you really don't know what you're doing back then, or at least you think you think you kind of know what you're doing, and then you look back and go, I didn't know anything when I was doing it. But expanding and learning as you went. And I probably did about 50 or 60 cars, full wet sands, and all that kind of stuff when I worked at GM for a lot of the guys. And these weren't, most of them weren't professionally painted. These are all garage painted cars and all that kind of stuff. And you put enough clear on there and hope for the best. And my job is to try and make it look better, and get all the junk out of the paint, and everything else. And it just continue to expand from there. And then the interest, you learn a little bit more, you get interested in other things. And of course, chemistry starts to change, the products start to change, the processes are changing. And it's forever, especially in the last probably 10 years, it's been very rapid in the change in the industry in
That it
general.
has. That it
I mean,
has.
there's
It's,
very limited options back when I started, 23 years ago. McGuire's, 3M, Norton, those are basically the things that you could, find. Even the body shops, there wasn't much change or, you know, different products that you could kind of get your hands on. And so, you kind of worked with what they had. So,
and I think even till today, with us as a detail industry, we've undergone and embraced a huge change in chemistry and evolution of chemistry, and but I feel like the body shops. Every time I go into a body shop, they're still using a lot of very traditional products. Like they haven't yet jumped
some,
on
yeah,
board with
some
that.
are, some are, it depends if they get a little new lifeblood in there with some of the people that are doing the grunt work, as they call it, the unpaid stuff, the polishing and the stuff that actually makes the car look good.
Yeah,
If you got some young blood in there that have somewhat of an interest, then they're going to sort of venture out and see some of the new stuff. But there's definitely some old dogs that they're still using the paste compounds that come in a can, that you slap on the pad and you have to spritz with water. And I mean, it's a very fun, messy business when you're using that kind of stuff. A lot of these no dust, low dust compounds and all that of nowadays, it's that works pretty easy, right? Back in the day when you're like literally spooning out compound onto the pad and spraying water, I mean, it's everywhere. It's all over you. You're just covered in dust, and there's marks everywhere. You got to
yeah.
wash the
It
car
was
down for your.
necessary to wear an apron at that
Oh
time.
yeah, I mean it was everywhere. It's in every crack of you, and it's almost like when you're metal polishing nowadays. You kind of come out looking just horrible, right? And now you can go in and you don't even if you do it right, you don't even get a speck of anything on you, right? And you don't have to wash the car 3 or 4 times as you're going along. You don't have to tape off all the stuff. And if you happen to hit something rubber with that kind of stuff, I mean, you basically use some shoe polish if you can, and try and make it look good for the customer, because that stuff was white forever. So
Yeah, yeah. No, for sure. So now with you learning as you go in the field, I'm sure that helped you understand how to become and be probably a better supervisor because you have time in the field of doing these.
Yeah, and I learned quite a bit too, because I ended up spending some time in paint repair on the assembly line too.
Oh
And then
wow.
I ended up, a few years into it, I ended up actually in the paint shop on overtime as a supervisor. When other people wouldn't fill the line for overtime and they had to run the shop out or something along those lines, I was in the spacesuit. I was shooting door caps and underhoods and door jams and all that kind of stuff. And which you kind of get a different understanding of the process of the car. Working on the wet deck, doing the sealing and all that kind of stuff. It's just a whole different, things that you don't really think about. It's a whole different process. And then going from there to, paint repair, heavy paint repair and all that kind of stuff, where, it's basically like a body shop. Just, you're fixing panels and all that kind of stuff, but the process ends up being basically the same, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're not working out, for the most part, you're not working out dents and damaged panels. The odd time you are, but
Yeah.
it's runs and dirt nibs and all that kind of stuff that, and you kind of get an understanding, which kind of flowed nicely into, getting into the classic car restoration, because I mean, these guys are shooting in the garage machine and they're not pros, which
No.
means, I mean, there was like, not, there was boulders in the paint, when these guys are done.
Bugs, artifacts.
Yeah. And then there was, there wasn't one run, it was just a whole run panel. Right. And but the nice part is, if you lay it on nice and thick, you can kind of make something out of it. And, with regular paints on cars nowadays, there's nothing there to play with. So, it's a lot harder in some respects now, versus back in the day too, with, the processes and all that kind of stuff, because you really don't have, much to play with. And there's not a lot of room for error like back in the day. You could go at something fairly aggressive and still have a lot of stuff to play with, and nowadays you really can't.
Nope.
So
Nope. So with that, I mean, in moving forward and overseeing all that, what led you into, overseeing all these different brands?
Well, I mean, I left GM when the 2008 crash happened, and they were offering bio packages. And at that point in time, I kind of had my fill of the production life, and I didn't have the same zip I did when I started there. So I thought, you know what, I'm young, it's good enough. I've had my day there. I'm going to move on to something different. So I ended up leaving, took a buyout, and ended up managing a company in Toronto that did dealership detailing. They had, I think we were up to 5 or 6 dealerships. We were doing, anywhere from 1,000 cars to 1,500 cars a month. As far as production detailing goes, and managing
Wow.
that kind of stuff. So that sort of brought me, a little more away from just the technical hands-on. I used to do the polishing and all that kind of stuff for that company when the time came. But it, brought more into understanding how dealerships work and then managing flow, and which is, it's very similar to what I came out of with the assembly line. I mean, everything's got to move.
Yep.
If the parts aren't moving and people aren't doing their jobs, then, you're not making good cars and the line's not moving either. And you can, that kind of carried over to essentially production detailing and, producing and doing so many cars at, it was a high level of detailing, really. I mean, we weren't polishing every car, we weren't, sanding cars or anything like that, but the interiors had to be impeccable, or else, you were getting complaints from the dealerships. And these guys were, as anal as the anal customers are.
Yeah.
So in order to get out that many cars and all that kind of stuff, I mean, we did a full overhaul of the processes, changed the shop layout around. We went from being, basically scrambling every day when I started there to being 2 to 3 days ahead on orders, so that, if you happen to have something happen and you need to slide a car in, it's easy. Whereas before, when you're just running, car to car and everything else, and it's just a mess and you never really get ahead, you don't really have that option of sort of getting that stuff through, in a timely manner. And it just compounds the issues that you've already
Oh
got,
yeah.
right? So, um, but yeah, it sort of brought me into, a different aspect of detailing that I find, a lot of detailers kind of disregard as detailing, really. And it if you do it right and you do enough of it and you kind of have your shop set up, I mean, there's real good money in production detailing.
Yeah.
So, if you do it right, and have the business acumen to set your packages and set your processes up and all that kind of stuff as well. So,
Now, do you
but
think the production detailing, this day and age with so much information online and the way that YouTube and the internet makes detailing look now so premium and so pure with having to remove every stain, every scratch kind of scenario,
yeah,
do you think a standalone shop would be a good candidate still for production
it,
detailing?
it can. I mean, we were sort of a different setup. So we had a standalone shop. We did tinting, we did clear bras, we did undercoating, we did the detailing as well there. We had almost a full-time PDR guy for
Oh,
doing all
wow.
the dents and everything else in the doors and whatnot. My boss at the time, because I was managing, I didn't own the business, but my boss at the time was a really smart business guy. And we ended up having employees within the dealerships, which means the overhead and all that kind of stuff was kind of covered off by the dealership, and worked out packages with them so that essentially he wasn't really paying rent. He was in a non sort of currency type way, because he would give them a decent rate on the detailing, but he wasn't paying any rent, or anything overhead like that in some of these detail or the dealerships.
Yeah.
And that's where we really pump volume out too, is, we went in from 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 to 7. Sometimes it was one guy, sometimes it was two guys, sometimes it was three guys that were in the dealership, depending on the size of the dealership. And then everything else kind of flowed into the central shop, which was, I mean, it wasn't a huge shop. We're probably 6, 7,000 square feet. But we basically, it was an assembly line. Our full recons were down to, which is like, your engine bay, full interior cleanup, wash on the outside, and everything else. And of course, like I said, this was, and shampoo and like all the stains and everything else. So like the interior was the pickiest part of it. I think we were down to like 38 minutes. per car.
Wow. Wow.
So, we spent a good amount of money on equipment to make the process faster. Like I said, reject the shop and everything else. When I started there, they were about 3.5 hours.
Holy crap. Yeah,
So
they were losing
yeah,
their butt.
no, they were, yeah, and that was part of the problem. And that was one of the nice things about where I came from, as I dealt with ALBS is what they call it. It's assembly line balancing, which is, taking essentially amount of movements and time into the person's job on an assembly line, and managing, that throughout the entire process of the car making. Well, kind of carry that over into, when you're trying to figure out how to make things more efficient in detailing as well. You start to look at which processes you need to do, start to break them down, and start to figure out how you can start, cutting out all the garbage and wasted time and
Unnecessary
everything.
stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all the unnecessary stuff, and wasted time. Walking is, was a big thing in the assembly line. Was they didn't want people walking, a half a step more than they had to, because at that point you're not adding any value to the car in assembly. Well, the same thing goes for detailing as well, right? If you spend, say 1,000 steps walking a day, that's 1,000 steps that if you set the shop up right, you can bring that way down. That's a lot of extra, that gives you extra cars, lots of extra cars in the year. So, changing your processes and changing, the steps in which you do the processes and all that kind of stuff. And ultimately trying to get to the same result, without cutting the corners, but just
Yeah.
rejigging everything so that you can get there faster, right? So I think a lot of people think, the assembly line detailers and all that kind of stuff. I mean, if you're doing it in a good capacity, you're not really cutting the corners. You're still ending up, really close to the guys that are spending a lot of time doing the same amount of work. You're just doing it way more efficiently, right?
And
So,
most customers don't even see the difference. The
oh,
majority.
no, and like I said, these guys, I mean, they're as picky as the pickiest customers. So, when the guys didn't do their job and didn't follow the processes, the car came back, and you don't get paid to do that car twice. So, by the time I left there, I think, on the year, we were between 4 and 6 returns for the year. We were getting 4 and 6 returns a day when I started there, for, touch up here and, miss spots there and all that kind of stuff. And you kind of work on getting your quality processes down, your quality checks down, some standardization and all that kind of stuff. And, brings the quality up really quickly. Standardization, just like when you're building a car, I mean, it just almost becomes muscle memory.
Yeah.
You don't really have to think about it anymore, and that's what brings your quality way up. When you standardize the processes to pretty much everything that they have to do, every tool that they have to use, and making sure that they use that standardized process every time, your quality is going to go through the roof.
Yeah. And that
So
goes to your point, production detailing or premium higher end detailing. That process, if you got that locked in, that's going to help you overall be more effective and more
yeah.
efficient.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I mean, there's a small variability, but ultimately, a clean interior is a clean interior. Whether it took a guy 38 minutes and he did it properly by shampooing the carpets with, proper equipment and using the proper processes and materials and chemicals and everything else, versus somebody else that takes 2.5 hours. If the end result ends up being a good, clean car, where you're not, like I said, you're not cutting the corners, you're just doing things more efficiently, then the difference between the two cars ends up being, negligible. So, and that's where, some guys will sometimes pride themselves on taking extra time, and where, the customer really doesn't pay for the extra time. They just want the
No.
clean car,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I'd rather do, 50 clean cars in a shorter time than 5 ones and spend, copious amounts of time doing, oddball things that, the customer really doesn't find value in.
Well, those that take pride in that extra time is all fine and dandy, but they're also taking pride in not getting paid.
Well,
And
that's it, right? So, and like I said, the more people you touch cars, of course, these are all happy customers too in the end, then they end up telling more people. So, if you're doing 10 cars a week, but you could be doing, say, 30 cars a week, there's 20 people that aren't talking about your business, right? And like I said, if it, ultimately the customer, if you have a satisfied customer, and you're doing the proper processes and doing what you're saying you're supposed to be doing, then that's it. I mean, that's, you get paid, and you know, the customer's happy, and that's the end of the transaction, you know, and then they tell everybody else, and you get more transactions, and then you end up, you end up making more money that way,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So, and then, like yourself, you can expand your business, you can get a bigger shop, you can make more money that way. And it's good for the single detailing guys that are standalone operators, which myself included. I was for almost 10 years, 8 years. But you're never going to make the numbers that a shop can with 6 employees, and you're never going to be able to fit all the other fun stuff in, like the PPF and the tinting and the rust proofing and all that kind of stuff, because it's just, I mean, you're only one guy.
yeah. You're
So
limited to what you can do.
you're going to
So
max out. And there's nothing wrong with single operator guys that, if you enjoy what you're doing and you're making a healthy living doing it, and all that kind of stuff, there's nothing wrong with that either.
no, no.
But there's nothing wrong with having 6 employees and making 100 times the money either. So
This is true. This is true. Now, production wise, like I said about, whether it being a fit for, a standard, like even a standalone guy, I
yeah,
feel that the production side of detailing is more of a successful setup at a dealership atmosphere,
yeah,
because not that the expectations aren't high, but I feel sometimes maybe the customer's expectations aren't as high as if they were to
yeah.
bring it to a standalone shop.
Yeah, usually, ultimately, what we experienced was, it wasn't the customer's expectations we had to meet; it was the sales guy's expectations, and they were anal. Most of those guys were anal. So if you could make it through the sales guys, then the customers never generally had a problem at all, right? It was the sales guys and ladies that were the most anal part of the process.
Yeah, until you put them in the
So if you can
back
make them
front.
happy, I
Yeah.
mean, like I said, that's why we had very little returns, because from ultimately the sales guy, I mean, these guys would literally spend 20 minutes to a half an hour going through these cars before they hit the customer's hands. Any bit of thing, any stain, any part you missed, any door cup you didn't do, ashtray, whatever, that you happen to miss. I mean, these guys found it. I mean, they made it a game to find something. And when you can return and these guys can't find something time and time again, it's a good feeling for the guys, but it also leads to, like I said, you have zero complaints. Ultimately the only complaints and stuff that we ever used to get back was stuff that wasn't included in the packages. Customer would complain that there were scratches or swirls on the car. Well, that wasn't part of what we do as the process. So, they would bring it back, they would pay extra to have it polished. But it really wasn't a traditional, miss. It was just something that was outside the scope of what we were doing. So,
No, that makes sense. That makes
mm,
sense. So, once you got all this under your belt, again, going back into where you landed with being able to represent, you know, all these brands and be head
yeah.
of everything up in Canada, how did that come about?
So I moved from there basically, and went back to school and ran my own business at the same time for a bit. So I went to college when I was 18, 19 at the time. I went to, and took operations management, because I took the job at GM, and they said, okay, well, if you want the job, you got to do operations management. Originally, I was going to take golf management, so I was going to become a golf pro back in the day. And I'm glad I did, and I'm glad I didn't kind of go that route, because shortly thereafter the golf courses started kind of folding up. The dollar went above the American dollar at one point, so the American travelers weren't coming to Canada, and the golf courses started hurting. They were cutting people off, and all that kind of stuff from positions and whatnot. And so I ended up taking the job at GM, and getting paid very well for a student at the time. I mean, I think minimum wage was like $6 or $7 or something like that an hour, and I think at GM they started paying at 22.
Oh, wow.
So looking at the wage, going like, even nowadays it was good money.
Yeah.
But when you're a student, and of course, you got your mom's like, well, I think you really should take this job. And it's like, well, I still want to be a golf pro and all this kind of stuff. And no, I think you're going to take the job. Right. And then, so then you kind of slide into that. And that's ultimately where I ended up for many, many years. And, and then I went back to college again, after I left the other place, and ran my own business for a number of years as well, and took accounting. And, just to learn some, new skills. Had an interest in some accounting stuff. I was always good at it before. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to go back to school, ran my own business full time as well. So,
Now, would
went
you
to
say
school,
that
yeah,
taking
went
that
to,
time to do the accounting helped out quite a bit?
it does. I mean, it gives you a different sense of, everything's a good learning experience as far as I'm concerned, right? So, but it gives you a
Agree.
good sense of the nuts and bolts of the business, and looking at, ultimately the numbers,
Yep.
and cash and everything else, and where it goes in the business, and deep, a bit diver, deep dive into, where the money goes, how it travels through the business, and ultimately, things to look for that make businesses successful, versus those that aren't successful, and learning how to manage cash flow and a cash flow, account, and all that kind of stuff, and your statement of cash flows, and your income statements, and your balance sheets, and all that kind of stuff, the basics like that, and kind of understanding how stuff sort of flows through. It's kind of, it's kind of interesting, and it definitely helps for sure. And I graduated, accounting honors and all that kind of stuff as well, and was working full time, and worked full time up until I started here. So I worked for myself, and like I said, I was doing both, which is, you're running a full time business, going to school. So I go to school, and
That's
then
exhausting.
immediately after school, I would go and detail. Sometimes I'd be out, 6 o'clock in the morning working on a car until school started at noon. Go to
Wow.
school, until 5, and then leave school, and work on another car as well. And I had, at the time, I had a family too. So I had a wife, and a son who was young at the time, and, trying to fit in some family time too, which made it, an interesting time, but, it definitely was well worth it in the end.
Yeah.
So
There's some sacrifices that, in the
yeah,
process of
and
life that you have to make.
yeah, so ultimately I graduated. Went into university, was going to take accounting into university, got 2.5 years through, and then I had the job opportunity for 3D come my way, and ended up taking that. So I never finished university with the accounting, but I took the full-time opportunity here, and I've been here ever since. So it was six years ago now. It flies pretty quick.
Oh, wow. Wow. So how did they find you? I mean, were you somebody that they were already
It's
familiar
funny
with?
because I did some product testing for Tunch at 3D. Like, I couldn't even tell you, it was a long time ago. Well, that was back when Dave Bynum ran autopia.org, before 3D bought it. When 3D bought it and they started advertising, I kind of approached Tunch at the time, and did some product testing for their 3D HD line when it was launched with 7 products. And to be honest, they didn't like 6 of the 7 products, and sent them the feedback and all that kind of stuff. And didn't know that, at the time, that he also had 3D. I didn't associate the HD with the 3D. I thought literally that was all he did was 7 products.
Yeah.
And so, lo and behold, years go down the road, and I start independently distributing the 3D stuff for a year. Did quite well in that regard, and then the opportunity came, as far as becoming a manager for 3D, with my background. And I decided to, like I said, took the leap, went out of university, took the full-time position here, and that's sort of how it started. And I'm basically back, kind of with 3D in a roundabout way, from years ago, of using some of the stuff and testing some of the stuff and talking to Tunch directly, and not really knowing anything about 3D or the business or what they did at all. Like I said, and originally, for years, I thought they made 7 products. I had no idea 3D was a, bench chemical company, and they're a, fairly large company out of California at the time. And didn't know, that Tunch, had owned a chemical company before 3D for years, and was successful at that. And all this stuff, you just, back then too, Google and stuff like that really wasn't as prevalent. You kind of didn't do
Yeah.
as much research as you do nowadays. And so yeah, and ended up sort of falling back into it again, and I'm talking to Tunch again years later, and finding out that it's a whole different ballgame I didn't even know about. So
Now, when you got started, I mean, where you're at now? You said you have 2 stores and a couple of trucks on the road.
yeah,
Where were you at when you got started? It's
when I started, we had 1 sales guy and a Savannah man on the road. So that was it. And then I started in a capacity that wasn't there. They never had a manager before. And the line was, they're looking for line growth and, some managing support. I also ran a territory for a period of time as well to obviously help pay the bills, because managing something that wasn't very big at the time, wasn't going to pay the bills as far as my salary goes. So, I ran a territory for a while and did some of the managerial stuff, and then we hired another sales guy to take over my territory full time. And then, I did more full time managing. We, created the training facility as well. So I got more into doing the training. I'd been training for years anyways. So it's funny because I started looking back at when I started doing some detailing training. I think it was around like 2002 is when I started doing some detailing training. And it was all charity at the time. So I would do these little detailing training days back in the day, and I would raise money for charity and all that kind of stuff, and guys would pay $30 or whatever for the day. And I did probably 5 or 6 of those back long time ago. And
Nice.
then stepped away from training and in a different capacity and all that kind of stuff, and then step back into it again. So we created a training facility, we're here about 4 years ago now, 3.5, 4 years ago, we built it here. So we have our second store and a full-time training facility as well. And so I focus on the training. I do the 3D training, I do the Fine Lab training, and I also do the IDA training as well. So I'm a recognized trainer for the IDA as well. So, myself and Yvonne are the two guys in Canada right now that do the IDA certifications too. So, started getting more involved in the IDA as well as far as the training goes, just to expand on, different parts of training that I think were of value to not only our company, but also to the detailers as well. And firmly believe that, setting standards and proper standards in the industry are going to definitely help everybody in the industry.
Oh
So,
yeah, oh yeah. Especially when you have someone like yourself who has all the background and experience from so many different positions. That's not just about having your hands on a polisher.
yeah.
And that's where a lot of these guys
No,
need.
and like even when we do our 3D training, I spend, about 4 to 5 hours in business training to start.
Very nice.
And I think that's, so I think people get too involved in technical training and all that. And ultimately, I mean, you could be the best detailer and run an unsuccessful business multiple times. So, I mean, I'm not going to make you the best business guy in the world, but at least give you a good background on the, some of the nuts and bolts that make successful businesses.
Yeah, do's and don'ts.
Um, yeah, and then we do, for Fine Lab, we do what we call it's called a heal me, but something that I developed, which is a workshop for our installers, and we have a maximum of 14 installers at the time. Of course, this was pre-COVID, and we have a workshop that focuses heavily on the business aspect as well as some of the technical stuff, but a lot of the business aspect and getting our guys together, working together, going through the highs and lows and of the business, what works, what doesn't work, and all that kind of stuff. And then some guys work on different aspects of the business together. We've had great partnerships over the years as well, where in an industry where everybody doesn't, kind of like everybody else, as far as the coating industry goes, all of our guys end up almost forming alliances and working together so that ultimately, our coating brand and everything else, will survive, and they're not going to go to a competitor. Right. So,
Yeah.
we pick our guys, we're stringent, and we pick the best that that we can find as far as the coating people go. And, all of our guys tend to end up working together, which works out for the benefit of everybody. Right.
Oh
So,
yeah,
yeah, it might
absolutely.
not be you doing the coating job, but at least that, when you give it off to one of the other guys, the quality's there as well. But the customer's not looking at other alternatives, right? Which is our big thing to the guys. It's like, yeah, you might not be able to do it yourself, but somebody else may have the capacity to do it. And then at least the customer doesn't go to a competing product, right? So they're going to be satisfied based on, the good feedback that they've had, which is the reason why they, 9 times out of 10, they approached your company in the first place. So,
And that's such a, Fine Lab coatings and products are such a well respected brand in the industry, amongst others.
yeah.
But yeah, they definitely have a good following, good track record. and everything about the product just screams premium, which is
Yeah.
very neat.
Yeah,
So
I think we were the third distributor worldwide to come on the program for them.
oh wow.
So we were really, really, really early on. I'm excluding the USA because they're based out of the US, but the UAE and Europe, I think, were just before us, and then we're right after them. And we've developed a good program here. We do things a little differently in Canada than the States does, and there's some certain things that have worked really well for us that they're probably going to be amalgamating worldwide as to how we run our business over here, because we've been very successful. So I think we're the number one distributor in the world outside of the US. We're not a big
Wow.
country. We're not a big country, so there's a lot of other countries on the program that are a lot bigger than we are. But having been in the industry for so long, and knowing what I didn't like in the industry and what I enjoyed in the industry, I could really take the good points and just make sure that they're all there in our program, and not make some of the same mistakes that some of the people, some of the companies in the past had made as well, and just avoiding some of those things altogether. So
Now, do you have any conflict in regards to, not necessarily with in-house, but like from consumers or detailers about both Fine Lab, and I know 3D has a coating as well, correct?
yeah, we don't sell. It's weird because we don't sell the 3D coating here because of our agreement with Fine Lab. Fine Lab was first. And we've been very happy with the ceramic light from Fine Lab. Is as far as I'm concerned, it's the best product on the market for the price. And as far as the attributes go and how well it holds up to everything and everything else, versus how much it actually costs to the installer or the consumer and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, we don't really have too much conflict because of the way that we've separated a lot of the product line for pro use only
Mm,
and for consumers. So the consumers have a good smattering of products for the thing, but we have certain things that are only available to our pro side, and we keep it very black and white when it comes to that. So there's no real overlap in having some prosumer stuff that kind of geeks too much into the pro level lines and
yep.
all that kind of
Yep.
stuff. We not that any of the consumer products are a bad product, but our offerings are exclusively to our pro
Yeah.
installers.
Okay, you got to separate it, and then that's the other thing too is the installers have to have some kind of, you know, grounds of knowing that they have some kind of special approach versus just like everybody else, like
Yeah,
the
and there's certain
consumer.
things, like I said, we do things differently in Canada. So like there's certain products that were available to consumers elsewhere in the world. We won't make them available to consumers in Canada. It's just another differentiating factor, for our guys. And it gives them another selling point too. If certain products like topper products and all that kind of stuff, we literally just keep them for our pro guys, and that gives them an edge over not being a certified installer as well. So it's just one more thing that helps. And Fine Lab in itself has done a good job in creating a great line, but also making sure that there's good differentiation between the products, so that the pro level products are pro level products, and the consumer products are consumer products. And there's great value in the pro level products over the regular consumer grade products and all that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and that's definitely what would make it
Mhm.
different. So for a consumer, whether they're getting something that is a consumer level versus a pro level, there's such a big difference that they know the
Yeah,
difference. So when they pay to have it professionally done, they
yeah.
feel better about it. They have a peace of mind.
Absolutely. And, I mean, warranties, claims aside, I mean, we've had almost zero in the 4 years now we've been on the program. So, something like that over that span of time, if you're not supporting a good product, you're gonna definitely see some issues. And they've been really, really good in that regard too, with a good solid product to back the lineup. And failure rates, they're part of the industry, but if you can keep it to an absolute minimum, I mean, you've got something good on your hands and all that kind of stuff. And we really value the partnership that we have with them. And I said we were early adopters, and they've been very good with us, as a distributor and all that kind of stuff, and making sure that we can kind of, we have the right tools, we have the right products to really support our business. So, ultimately it supports a bunch of other businesses as well. So,
This is true.
you know, we
Yeah.
have a lot of guys that that started on the program that were not coded. They'd never done a coating in their life, and 2 years down the road, their main business is coatings. And it's we've had guys that tell us it puts food on the table, pays their mortgage, and all that kind of stuff, and they're making more money than they ever have. And ultimately, their customers are even happier than they were before.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, that the coatings have definitely made a world of a difference. Now, as far as this last year, 2020,
yeah,
with your business and everything, with the storefronts, did you
yeah.
see a big difference? Did you have quite a few shutdowns during the period of the
We
year?
we
Or?
had yeah we had a massive shutdown, but because we do sanitation as well,
Mm-hmm.
sanitation products and disinfectants and whatnot, we were open. We had curbside pickup for a good chunk of time in the spring, but our sales are actually up.
Oh,
So
very nice. A lot of
they're up quite a.
online stuff.
Everything's up.
Yep.
It's kind of weird because even our accounts, I've got one sales guy who his main accounts are like kind of small used car dealerships that he
Mm-hmm.
supplies. I mean, all of them were closed in the spring at one point for about 6 or 8 weeks, but his numbers actually went up for the month, like in comparative to the year before,
Oh wow.
which I don't know how he pulled it off, but I mean, that's good having good sales guys. But
Yeah.
we kind of found other avenues to go, and ended up working different parts of the business to kind of make up for certain areas that, I mean, they were just literally shut down. So online took off. I mean, we've been grooming the online for about, well, for me, I've been really focusing on trying to groom for about 3 years. It's been online for longer than that, but making sure that we hire the right people to do the SEO, and doing a proper job on that. It definitely paid off now because our online went way up. I don't even We're in the hundreds of percentile up over the year before.
Wow.
So and that's it. That's just because two things: we did a good job in the back end, and setting ourselves up, and people just having copious amounts of time to spend online, and you're like, and copious amounts of time to just, I don't know what to do with my time, so I'm going to polish my car. So they look for stuff to buy, right, stuff to do. And like most guys would come in and they say, normally I don't have time to do it myself, but he's like, I'm not going to work, so I got all kinds of time now.
Yeah.
So so yeah, we had a lot of people come for that as well. A lot of new people to the detailing industry, especially in like polishing.
Oh
Like we
yeah.
sold an absolute ton of polishers and polishing products in the springtime because we had so many new people buying polishers and polishing their own cars. And at least nowadays, like when I started polishing a car, I don't think YouTube was out. Nowadays you could buy a polisher and you can watch 30 hours of how to polish a car on YouTube, and at least have some sense of what you're doing. Back in the
Yeah.
day, I mean, there was nothing. I mean, you
That
could
was
go to the
trial and error.
library if you're lucky and get a VHS tape of how to detail your car, but YouTube wasn't around. So
No.
and I think that helps too, is there's a lot more information out there, so people are more apt to give it a try because now you're not going blind. Now you've spent some time, because of course you got nothing else to do, spend some time on YouTube and researched for hours of what you want to buy and how it's going to work and all this kind of stuff, and coming in somewhat educated, you
Yeah.
know into the process and what you're looking for, right?
So
So
there's some
that
vetted.
entail helped us really. I mean, everybody's YouTube videos and all that kind of stuff is, as much as their, competitors' products and all that kind of stuff, it doesn't really matter.
No.
The knowledge is what matters, and that knowledge helps us, right? Somebody else put it out there and they're using different products. It doesn't really matter, but they're showing the process, and ultimately they're going to go with who they respect or who they find online, or who has the best reviews to buy their stuff.
Yeah.
But all of that information is good information. So
Yeah. And
there's
they
very
intrigue
little,
them.
bad information on the internet. Yeah, there are some, oddball ones, but for the most part, people are trying to do the right thing, and they're, providing pretty decent information. And people are going to figure it out anyways. They're going to figure out what's the good and the bad, because they're going to see 7 videos of people doing it very similar and one guy doing it completely different,
Yep.
you know, and they're going to go, it doesn't kind of look right. Like all these other guys do it this way and this guy's doing it this way. And they're going to disregard, those videos anyways. So, but yeah, I mean, all that, like I said, all that kind of stuff, the education aspects and everything else that are available nowadays is just phenomenal for the industry. And it definitely, we're on a different end. We're not competing with the detailers like I used to back when I ran my business, which is good for us because all these educational things just create more detailers for us as customers. Are they all going to be successful? No. I mean, like I said, you could be the best detailer, but unless you got a good business acumen, you're not going to run a successful business. But for us, it means more sales.
Yeah.
So even in the short term, we like long term. We want to see everybody that comes into our store be a successful business person, if that's what they plan on being. But in the short term, it's sales. Long term, obviously the long-term goal is to have long-term customers because they create more value for your
Relationships.
company.
Yep.
Right. And they're a lot cheaper to maintain long-term customers than they are getting new customers all the time. So
This is true. This is true. Well, it's good though that last year you had, an understanding of what was going on, and even with COVID, there was still some success in regards to the bottom line of things. And even
yeah,
though,
I mean, the only thing that really affected us a little bit this year is the fact that we couldn't teach and train, which
yeah,
is it's a good revenue stream that as far as what you make as far as the actual teaching goes, but that's ultimately not the goal. I mean, ultimately we don't charge an arm and a leg for the training. Ultimately we just want to get people on the program and doing things right so that they can create a successful business and happy customers, and then the money will flow in in the future for longer terms, right? So and we want to make sure that people are following the safe practices and doing stuff properly and everything else, so so that they can be successful ultimately, right? So
yeah,
like I said, that's why we focus a lot more on the business aspect to start with our students in the 3D program than maybe others do, is because ultimately a guy that runs a successful business is going to be a customer of yours for a lot longer than a guy that doesn't run a successful business. So
so how does, with everything now and looking forward, what do you got going on coming into the new year for 2021? Anything
well,
special?
2021, I mean, my big focus now, hopefully with vaccines and everything else coming in, things hopefully opening up. I mean, we want to get more involved with the IDA training again. I got a backlog of IDA training stuff that's, been piling up all year. And, we haven't been able to really schedule anything because we just don't know. For a long time, you just don't know if you're going on lockdown, they're going to shut things
Yeah,
down the way that they have their restrictions and everything else. But ultimately, I think when things start to open up this year, we're going to try and plow through a good chunk of IDA training to start. Bring our 3D training back online again. Again, I couldn't even tell you how many people on a waiting list for 3D training
that's
that's been
awesome.
piling up because we only ran 2 classes all summer last year,
Oh wow.
and we ran them back to back because again we didn't know we didn't know if we were going to
Yeah.
shut down again, so we just piled 2 classes in a row almost, and then didn't schedule anything after that. And we basically I've got a massive backlog of training that we're just trying to get through once things open up and we can safely do it. The big focus will just to try and get everybody trained up again and get the training aspect of it going again. And then same thing with Fine Lab, because of the way that the program has been working and the feedback and how well it's been doing for all of our other installers. The backlog for people that want on board for that, is massive as well. And we were very selective anyways as far as who we pick. But I mean, I've got lots of requests from all across Canada to fill in gaps for us, which will end up helping consumers in the end,
Oh
because we'll
yeah.
be able to make sure that they have a coding specialist somewhere near them anyways. So we're newers, which means we don't have quite the same amount of people spread throughout Canada. And our goal is to start filling in those holes essentially. And with so many people from across Canada wanting to come to that training, I mean the holes will get filled up fairly quickly
Oh
next
yeah,
year, which will be good. It'll be good for everybody. It'll help the brand grow and help serve some of the customers that we're not serving right now. So
very nice. Good, good. So now, with coming close to our hour mark with everything, is there anything that you could put out there that would be helpful to detailers or those maybe that are getting into storefronts or distribution like yourself? Any good information that you could hand off that you feel was
yeah,
valuable
I
to
mean,
you?
ultimately, sell, if you're doing storefront, sell something that you personally would use and can stand behind. And it sometimes doesn't necessarily mean that you incorporate an entire line in what you're carrying and all that kind of stuff. 3D for the most part, the line is really good, and there aren't too many products where I can't really back them. And there's a little bit of variation in that too, because we focus on certain products in Canada. We have products made that they don't even supply elsewhere in the world. Like we have a salt remover that 3D makes, and it's not available anywhere else. They make it for us, which,
Damn.
if you can talk to somebody over there, it should be available to the guys in like Michigan and Ohio and all that kind of stuff. But certain things like that. But you got to be able to stand behind the products and be able to get the results that your customers are looking for with the products that are on your shelf. If you can't get to that point, then find something that's going to fill that gap in to get you to that point as well. I mean, for us, we're a national distributor, so we're a little different than the regular ones. But if you're starting a storefront, I mean, ultimately, you know, get whatever you can kind of get your hands on that are going to fulfill the needs of your customers,
Yeah.
and going to get you to the end. And if it's a full product line, great. I mean, if it's a few products from one line and a few products from another line, you have 5 or 6 lines that are incorporated in it, that works as well. Ultimately, the happy customers are what you're looking for. And if it takes more than one product line, that's there's nothing really wrong with that.
No.
You're running your shop. So, but like I said, you should be able to take any bottle off your shelf and be 100% behind that bottle. And it should do what you're telling the customer it does, 100%. And if it doesn't, then it shouldn't be on the shelf and promoted as such. So, and as far as other things go, I mean, guys have branched out into different types of businesses. So we've got some coating, some of our coating guys that have branched into industrial coatings, because there's still like other businesses that were shut down, construction didn't. So construction was pretty much running through the entire pandemic, and some of them pivoted into doing some more industrial stuff. And then, it's not as glamorous as, polishing Ferraris, but, it definitely pays the bills and, can actually net you more per hour than working on, supercars sometimes too. So, to branch out into different things, I always tell people, keep an open mind in all parts of the business. And, there's a lot of good in any part of the business, from like a hand car wash all the way up to, like I said, polishing and coating Ferraris or something like that. But there's other aspects that are outside of automotive that you can go into, that the products carry over into. A lot of detailing products carry into janitorial as well. And, and hey, sanitation's a big thing nowadays.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah, like I
Huge.
said, it may not be as glamorous as polishing certain things, but you know what? It can make you a lot of money, and it can make you a successful business person too. So,
That's good information. I appreciate it. And how would one, whether they're in Canada or the US, how would one be able to find you, Bryan? And what are some links to like website information, things of that nature?
well, we have our online 3D Products Canada website. So it's 3dproductscanada.com. That's our online store. Also has some training information on there as well. If you're looking at the coating line that we carry, it's finelabcanada.com. Also has some information and sheets on there that you can fill out if you want more information on that product line as well. We retail our big boy blowers through the 3D Products website. And Speedo Coat is sort of an offshoot product that we're just starting to groom now. But Great lineup out of Ohio as far as refinishing stuff goes, and it's nice because it's kind of cuts all the middle guys out of the refinishing industry. So we're selling top-notch clears and products at basically almost distribution pricing. So very, very, very good stuff. And if you want to find me directly, I mean, Instagram, Fine Lab Canada, or 3D Products Canada, Speedo Code Canada, Big Boy _ CA, if you're really interested in blowers. And then directly, 289-707-3541 is my phone number, and, text or call anytime. So we're always available.
Awesome. Well, Bryan, thank you very much. And thank you for being now into our double digits of doing these episodes. And a lot of the information I'm sure was very helpful. And I picked up some things myself. I mean, you have a lot of really good knowledge, especially on the production side. That's awesome. And that shows the light at the end of the tunnel for some of these guys that don't see the value in certain aspects of detail. And it shows them that every aspect has some level of success. It's just a matter, of course, how you approach it. So that works out really nice to get that information out there to them.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Yeah, there's successes in all parts of the business. So, just
great.
because it doesn't, doesn't work for you in one aspect, there might be some other aspect that does
Yeah.
work as well for you. And somewhere out there, somebody's making a lot of money in that part of the business. So,
Yeah. Some just aren't as glamorous as others when it comes to those areas of detailing, right?
nope. No, hey,
So,
it wasn't super glamorous for production, but it made a lot of money. So,
yeah, that's the glamour side, right? Well, thank you, Bryan. Appreciate it. Happy New Year. And thanks again for being on this episode of Reflection Artist Live.
thank you very much, sir. Have a good one, and enjoy your New Year.
You as well. Thank you. Take care. And thanks everybody for watching.